So last time we were talking about um, the suspicion around the beaver and animal hair found in the JonBené Ramsey case. We noted that apparently, according to some of the transcripts and things of that nature, um, with respect to the JonBené Ramsey case, um, they had found some beaver hair on the tape, some beaver hair residue, whatever, on the tape residue and stuff like that. They'd also found on JonBenét's hands, they had found some like dark animal hair, and we questioned the presence of animal hair and beaver hair. We questioned where such a thing could come from. Um, how common is beaver hair? How common is this dark animal hair? We know when we think about it, just in general, um, to me, I asked the question to the audience: how often do you hear about somebody wearing beaver hair? I don't hear it often at all, if I've ever heard it. Um, I'm not saying that it doesn't exist. I'm not saying that, the fact that I haven't heard it means that I'm in the correct part of the world or in the correct part of the country. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that personally, I've never heard of beaver hair discussed at length in terms of anybody having it. Is what my thing was, and the fact that it showed up on the crime scene was very suspicious to me from that angle, just from personal experience, because for somebody to have essentially fibers similar to John Ramsey, at least. Not only John Ramsey, we didn't even touch Patsy Ramsey, but for somebody to have fibers, the black wool is Israeli fiber, for somebody to have that in combination with beaver hair. First of all, the black Israeli wool fibers, from what I can tell, garments like that are expensive. You don't just pick them up off the rack and pay, a couple bucks for them and then walk away. Those things might cost you $100 or so, or even $50. So, the idea that somebody is walking around in a good shirt to commit a crime was in at first, as I mentioned that in another analysis, in another video, that was interesting to me, and quite suspicious. But then the fact that you couple this individual wearing it kind of gives a picture of what was this individual wearing that night. If we find animal hairs, we find beaver hairs, we find Israeli wool fibers, what was this person wearing? Right? And not only was this person watching John and Patsy, this person had to have known, because John, we talked about last time, John talked about this idea that the criminal had to have watched them and waited for the right time. Until they left the house, and then waited for the right time to pounce and go inside the house. Yeah, but that doesn't explain how the criminal had something on that was similar to what you were wearing that very night. What are the odds? What are the probabilities? That's interesting. It's suspicious. Not let alone that now we have discussions of, beaver hair that is also suspicious in the house. But we go a little bit further and we see that um, kind of the write up here that I've done, unmatched animal hairs that were dark animal hairs were found on both of JonBené Ramsey's hands. And the hairs could not be matched to any item in the Ramsey's house. And so, kind of pulling some of this information from the Chris Wolf versus Ramsey's lawsuit. Uh, how is it that, well, this is my issue. When you look at the beaver hair and the animal hair, the judge goes on to say, and this is very frustrating, and I don't want to get into it. I'm beyond ticked off. The judge goes on to say that since we can't match it, since we can't match these hairs to anything found in the house, that means it must be an external thing. How is it that just because you can't find it in the house, that means that it automatically had to have originated outside. All right. So the judge has concluded that these things were sourced outside of the house. So we're led to believe that this criminal bought beaver hair and Israeli wool, somehow, some way, got the right kind of Israeli wool. As John goes on to tell us that, this person could have been watching our house for hours without being unnoticed in our crowded neighborhood. I mean, let me tell you something. I can't remember right off the top of my head how much John and Patsy paid for that house. But that house is not cheap. John and Patsy were not living in a cheap neighborhood. They weren't. In expensive neighborhoods, you're only going to find certain types of people. Now, of course, that doesn't mean we're aware that people might come from all over to burglarize and vandalize and do all of those things to wealthier neighborhoods. We understand that. So we're not naive to that reality or to that fact. But John is acting as if somebody just pulled up in a random car, right? Was undetected and unnoticed, and because the neighborhood that he lives in, the wealthy neighborhood that he lives in, is so overpopulated and overcrowded, nobody noticed the thing. Nobody noticed anybody suspicious sitting outside in their car, just camped out in their car. Nobody noticed that because it was so crowded in the neighborhood. And since nobody noticed, then that person was able to slip by unscathed into their home, sight unseen, completely. Everybody is completely oblivious to this person who looks, normal, apparently. It looks normal, apparently. I was going to say who looks, sneaky, but apparently not. Apparently this person is normal enough to go undetected. This person is apparently some sort of contractor who just walks around in a beaver style coat and on top of a black wool Israeli wool sweater. Absolutely, that's what this person is doing. Walking around in that. Oh, absolutely, because it's cold. Yeah, but I feel like if we think about what John and Patsy wore the night of, from what we know, they didn't even put that much clothes on. So this person was walking around, they would have been sweating. I can't prove that, so I'm not going to push that any further. But the person's moving around the house wearing beaver skin. It's hot. They're about to commit a crime. This person's moving about the house in beaver skin, in wool. Apparently dropping beaver skin fibers and hairs all over the place. And whatever other animal based clothing that is apparently highly vulnerable to shedding. What? The criminal comes in and wants to create a trail of evidence that leads to them. So it's a little bit about why I'm confused. But some other unsourced items from the house. We continue. Those are two things that thoroughly confused me. But before I get derailed or off track even further, other unsourced items, the black duct tape itself, you guys know this, and the cord used for the ligature were never sourced to the family, nor was the end of the paintbrush used to tighten the cord. I think they said that actually belonged to Patsy's little paint stick. Additionally, the unidentified male DNA did not match any of the Ramsey family, and was found under JonBenét's fingernails and in her underwear. Now, the thing about this with the underwear thing, though, is that from what I understand when I was reading the report in the unidentified male DNA, they could not replicate it, as per an email of Andy Horita to Amy JonBenét's and I think her supervisor. They couldn't replicate it, and so I'm still kind of, that is still kind of unproven to me. These observations led to, oh, I'm sorry, I missed the spot. Unmatched fibers. The fiber evidence in this case showed that the polypropylene fibers from the ligature cord were found on JonBenét's bed, suggesting that the cord may have been in her bedroom before it was used. Other fiber evidence discussed below implicated clothing worn by John and Patsy. And these observations led Judge Carnes to conclude that some of the materials used in the crime were brought into the home, supporting the possibility of an intruder. And this is, I guess, this is what I got hung up on earlier when I was going to say, Judge Carnes is saying that, because these items are sourced outside of the home, I'm sorry, like my mind is going a million miles a minute with frustration, and I'm just trying to keep it together. So Judge Carnes is like, oh, we conclude that some of these materials are sourced outside of the home. And it's like we're being led to believe, we're being gaslit to believe that this individual just happened to show up and hope that some of this stuff was at the Ramsey's household. What? Who does that? Like, seriously, you guys got to be like, these are adults thinking this way. You've got to be kidding me. Oh, he just showed up and whatever was available. This guy is really nifty. They knew they could trust themselves to build with whatever, to build whatever on the spot. Doesn't matter. You can give me a carton of milk and I'll make prison tools. I'll just call them that. That's what we're being gaslit into believing. That's what this person did. And it's just like, there's so many, and I'm telling you, people like to argue with me, but I'm telling you, there are so many unique things happening that it's just like, yo, yeah, this is once in a lifetime. What are the odds? There are so many things that you think about, that fall into that category with this case. It's like, man, 1 in a million. What are the odds that would happen to this family in this house at this time? And I'm not saying that can't happen. I'm just saying there's so many of them that we have to and I think what people don't understand is that there's so much. I don't think people really understand what you go through this case. I don't think people really understand the depth. There's so much that you have to explain away here. It's almost like you're fighting for your life to explain away all of the unique variables that come into play in this case. There's so many. And it's like, to me, you're fighting a losing battle, just to be honest with you. But anyways, going back to the unmatched fibers, fiber evidence in this case showed that the cord, or I'm sorry, fibers from the cord were found in JonBenét's bed. And I think when I was going through this, looking for sort of these unmatched or outsourced materials or external materials, I think that was interesting to me as well. Because if the fibers from the cord were found on JonBenét's bed, I think we just skip that, but we don't think about the implications of this. The criminal comes upstairs, right? This intruder comes upstairs, and at some point in time, it could be several things. The individual took out the rope and tried to put it around JonBenét before he picked her up. That's one thing. And some of the fibers kind of, trickled off into the bed and something like that. And whenever he took out the rope, he was standing over her bed in a way that the way that it's found on her bed, it was able to fall nicely onto her bed because she was maybe moved out of the way or something like that. So maybe he picked her up and tried to put the cord around her arms. The cord And that's why I say, once you start reading through this stuff, it becomes very difficult to find exactly where the true crime scene was, because you think about the puddle of urine in front of the wine cellar, and you think about any red fluids, and you know what I'm talking about when I say red bodily fluids. When you think about those, where are those? And I know that there was no penetration um, in the head region, of course. It wasn't enough to do that, but there is no red bodily fluids anywhere. Okay, fine. But in this lone corner, we see urine. Where is any other evidence of anything happening downstairs in the basement? That's kind of what makes me question what happened and where and how did we get down here to the basement? We don't have the privilege, because this is the thing. And maybe the cops just didn't do a black light in the basement. Maybe they just didn't do a black light in the basement. Hopefully they did. Maybe they didn't. I hope that's I hope and I don't hope that that's the case. There's two different reasons why I say that. But maybe they didn't do a black light in the basement to see if there were any other fluids on the ground. But they had to have done some sort of black light or ultraviolet light in the basement to be able to see the fluids on the ground. And so I wonder that, because now you have this cordage that was used on JonBené. Apparently it was the same thing. These polypropylene fibers from this ligature cord found in the bed, which means that the person was operating with the cord. So maybe they got up, whatever they did, or whether the cord was on their hip when they were picking her up, and maybe her hand slapped it or her feet slapped it, whatever is the case. It was enough to for the cord to start shedding. And I think that's what's interesting, because it indicates to you what type of movement existed. And not only that, but I don't see in the record anywhere that this animal hair was found in her bedroom. You see what I'm saying? So we find evidence of this animal hair and this beaver hair on her clothing or under the tape, right? We find evidence. Think about what's shifting. We find evidence of this beaver hair and this dark animal hair on the tape and on her hands, right? And this, so it lets us know that this thing is prone to shedding. She touched it at some point in time, but it's not in her room. But yet we see evidence of the shedding of the cord in her room, letting us know that the cordage came out in her room at some point in time, and the beaver hair and the animal hair had to have come out at some point in time later, or else it would have shed somewhere in her room close to her bed, which might indicate that this person got down the stairs and said, you know what, I'm now going to put this coat on down here, or whatever it is. I'm now going to interact with these animal hairs, or the animal hairs were a product of being down in the basement, and so she grabbed, reaching for something or whatever. Further along, thinking about the trace evidence is the idea that the fibers come into play at different times. That's what's also interesting, and that, I guess that's what I'm getting at. The fibers come into play at different times. The red fibers from Patsy come into play in the paintbrush kit. That's where those, and a little bit on the cordage, right? A little bit on the ligature. They come into play when you read some of the material. It's kind of embedded deep into the cordage. And then John's fibers, well, not John's fibers similar to John's fibers, we'll call it that because that's what they want to put it as in the documentation. Fibers consistent with John's clothing, his sweater. Those fibers only show up on JonBenét's person, right? And inside of her clothing garment, down inside of the pants, the long johns. And so when we think about who could have been handling JonBenet, whoever was handling JonBenet took her into an area where those things existed, because as Burke said, it's my house, I play there all the time, where those things existed, and that intruder took her into those spaces and wherever, and JonBenet interacted with those things. But the thing about it is, this person very thoroughly said, you know what? She touched this coat. She touched this sweater. All of this has to come with me. This tape, this rope, the flashlight, a bat, whatever was used on her. All of this has to come with me. So we have to understand then, what exactly did the criminal, it helps us to start putting together what the criminal came in the house with. And if this person came in the house with all of these things, that means that this person walked up in broad daylight with a beaver coat, a black wool shirt, a flashlight, and a baseball bat, right? What do you have? What do you to not be suspicious? And to definitely be efficient. You're not going to be carrying some of these things. Obviously, you can wear the coat and the sweater, but when you think about the bat and the flashlight and the cord and all these things, it probably would not fit in a little bitty backpack. It's probably got to be in a duffel bag so you don't look suspicious. I mean, you got somebody waltzing up to the Ramsey's house that doesn't belong there. You know, you might have some, neighbor that's kind of looking out and saying, I wonder who's walking across the street. And what criminal would even take that chance to be seen? Right? Walking up to just into the middle of the yard, right? Because they didn't have a gate at the time, and it was sort of a wide open concept in the front yard. And so the person, probably wanting to be, more discreet, is probably going to park around the back and walk around the back and do whatever they need to do. Whoever is dropping them off so they can, come back and pick them up later or whatever. They're, because what happens is somebody had to pick them up and come back and get them, or there had to be a car parked somewhere, either in an authorized driveway, or it had to be parked somewhere that you can see it and notice it and recognize it, but not too far away from the house that somebody would look suspicious walking across the street or be seen for a prolonged period of time with a duffel bag and a backpack. First of all, this person was sitting in this same car for several hours scoping out the house, gets out of the car in a beaver jacket and whatever else, in a backpack, and just walks right into the Ramsey's house. And nobody apparently saw anything. What? And somehow this person just happened to know, in checking all of the doors, it would have been one thing, because we know that John was like, oh, I didn't do a good job in being diligent about checking the windows and the doors and the this and that. I should have checked all the doors. The one place where it would have been the hardest to find, that's how they slipped in. It's not like because I guess Burke was like, oh, I always regret unlocking the door on Christmas Day. From what you tell us, they slipped in through the basement window and slipped back out. Because let me tell you something. If they can come through the front door by day, unscathed and untouched and unnoticed, you think that they're not going to walk out the same front door at nighttime? Guys, make it make sense, right? Make it make sense. I feel like I have so much to say. I'm going to take a break. I'm going to come back. Let me know what you think in the comments, like, share, subscribe. Make sure you're taking care of yourself. And until next time, think on that. Let me know what you think. Take it easy.